Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Kimmick and I teach AP Comparative Government and Politics. And welcome to the first video of hopefully a series of videos that will help review all of the curriculum, the vocabulary, and the concepts you need to be successful on the AP exam in May. And we'll be following along with College Board's CED, that's the course and exam description. So every video has a code, and that corresponds with both the unit and then the topic number within that unit. So this being our first, we're looking at Unit 1, Political Systems, Regimes, and Governments, and we're going to be talking about the practice of political science. In this video, we'll be looking at specifically the different types of evidence and how political scientists classify information, and then common metrics to know that they use and that you are most likely to see referenced on the AP exam. In the video description below, I have links to the various resources that I've hyperlinked in what you see on the screen. So you can do more investigations, or you can look for even more recent information and for these data sets specifically. All right, so let's get started. Political scientists classify information according to different types of data, and that would be quantitative versus qualitative data. Quantitative are all the statistics, the numbers that you see on charts, tables, graphs, such as population or the percent that live in cities, for example. Qualitative data are descriptions. These come from speeches, laws, and even political commentators and political scientists who give further fleshing out of ideas and information. And political scientists use both to make meaning and understanding about political systems and institutions around the globe. They also differentiate between two different types of statements. Empirical is really based on quantitative data. That's factual and data-driven. So for example, this statement, China's population growth rate has declined since the 1990s, is factually true. We can pull up the data, we can look at population growth rates for the past 35 years, and we can prove it to you. This is different from normative statements, which really are opinions or arguments. So for example, this statement, developing countries should expand parental leave as part of a population growth strategy, is an opinion, right? Because they are making an argument about what countries should be doing. And both the different types of data and the different types of statements are really important when we think about this final thing, causation versus correlation. Think to a science or a chemistry experiment, right? You use the scientific method to create a hypothesis and then create tests and run various tests to isolate your independent variable, right? In this case, you can see on the example, what you change would be the amount of water that you give a plant. The more water, hopefully, the more growth that a plant is going to have. Right? Well, political scientists live in the real world. They cannot isolate these experiments because they might be morally unethical or they're just unfeasible. So for political scientists to prove causation is very difficult. Most often, they're looking at correlation, which is an association among two or more variables. All right. Part 2 is looking at the common metrics that you need to know. And so for each one, I'm going to tell you what it measures, where to find this information, what data they use to create that metric, and how to read a score and what that score means. The first one is GDP, which stands for Gross Domestic Product. It measures the total value of goods and services provided and created in 1 year. Sorry, not provided, just created in 1 year. That includes all the things that are created, like t-shirts, cars, even pens and highlighters. It also includes services, like getting a haircut or having eye surgery, for example. Individual governments all have agencies that create and record the GDP, but it's also recorded by central banks. So groups like the IMF or the World Bank are really good sources to find that information. GDP is typically shown in US dollars, but it's not always true. So double check where the format of that. And this goes for all of the metrics in this class. You want to be careful about when that data was produced. So look at the example on the screen. This is from the World Bank. The most recent information they have on GDP for Afghanistan is from 2023, as opposed to all the other countries in the screenshot are from 2024, right? So when you're looking at several years, you may need to think about inflation. So be careful about the years. The next two measurements are derived from GDP, and they're a little bit better for comparison. So GDP per capita is taking the total GDP and you divide it by the total population of that country. That is not average income. Average income is different. But GDP per capita is good for comparing between different countries because it accounts for differences in population. So the UK has the lowest population out of all of our 6 countries, but it has a relatively high GDP. And that's different from China, which has a very high population of 1.4 billion people, but also a high GDP. But when you want to compare those two things, per capita is a more equal footing to start making some comparisons in meetings. Growth rate is really good for internal view on the health of an economy because it measures over time. It measures how fast an economy is growing or contracting by comparing over time between financial quarters, which is about 3 months. So it's good for internal, not necessarily between different countries. Human Development Index. The Human Development Index is created by the UN and it seeks to measure a country's overall achievement. So they use data sets about life expectancy, education, and the standard of living to develop a number which is recorded from 0 to 1. So a country that has a scale, a number of 0.22 is pretty underdeveloped. And a country that has a number of 0.84 is more developed. The Gini index or the Gini coefficient attempts to measure inequality within a society. And inequality is the difference between the very wealthiest person in the country and the poorest people in that country. To create this information, they take information from income surveys and they have a scale, again, of 0 to 1. So a scale of 0, everyone in that country makes the same amount of money. A scale of 1 is maximum inequality, where one person makes all the money and everyone else makes 0. This is often created by the World Bank or the World Inequality Database. Not all countries report data, so you may find some gaps if you're looking at countries beyond our AP6. The final 3 have to do, our metrics are created by NGOs or non-governmental organizations. They are separate entities that are formed for a particular purpose. And the first one is Freedom House. Freedom House measures the degree of freedom and democracy in a country. They pull information and they examine 10 political rights, 15 civil liberty indicators, and this is all based on the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And they then take that information, they categorize it, they classify and award points in that country, and they classify them as free, not free, and partly free on a scale of 0 to 100. If you want to read more, check out the Freedom House methodology for more information on their data sets. But for this, if you know that they just gather and measure freedom and they use different indicators, you're fine. Transparency International creates the Corruption Perception Index, and this measures the level of corruption or abuse of power by a government official for personal gain. That's corruption. Again, Transparency International is an NGO, and their whole purpose is to increase government transparency, right? They don't want corruption in government. What kind of corruption does the CPI measure? You can see a screenshot just from their website, but they pull from 13 different surveys that ask people questions about bribery and diversion of public funds, nepotism appointments, and other surveys and such. These are often self-reported, and often it's self-reported experiences with corruption. So they don't ask you, have you accepted a bribe, right? Because are people necessarily going to be very truthful? Maybe, maybe not. They ask questions that kind of get at what they're looking at with, in the past year, have you experienced or seen corruption in your daily life? So forth. So they use lots of different information to gather the data as best they can, and then again they categorize it. So 0 to 100. A country that has a ranking of 13 is very, very little corruption. There's very little abuse of power. A country that has a ranking of 92 is I switched them up. A country that has a very low number is very, very corrupt, and a country that has a very high number is less corrupt. The last one is the Fragile States Index. It used to be called the Failed State Index. They've just changed their name. If you use either, you're going to be okay. This attempts to measure how stable a country is and how the government is able to provide services to the people. And they classify them as strong states, weak states, and failed states. Failed states is when a government has really high corruption, there's a loss of sovereignty, and they can't provide goods and services. Weak states does that partly, and strong states are always able to provide government services to people. This is created by the Fund for Peace, which is another NGO. And they use various indicators that they've categorized to arrive at a scale of 0 to 120 points. 0 is very stable, so a low number is good. High numbers are bad. All right, so that was our very first video. Let me know if you have questions. You can type them in the chat, and I hope you have a good day.